Welcome to Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. I've been producing two exclusive series for My Outdoor TV, and that's a pay platform. You have to have a subscription to watch the content there, but there are no ads and it's all hunting and fishing, so that's pretty nice. But I want to bring you a preview of the first episode of my rut hunting strategies series, and I just started that. I wrapped up the Patterning Trophy Whitetails series just a few days ago, a couple weeks ago, and now I'm on to the Rut Hunting Strategies series. And again, like I said, that is a pay platform, but they have a free trial, a free subscription trial, so you can go and check this out if you want to. There's a link in the description that will take you straight to the Rut Hunting Strategies series. So when we come back from break, I'm going to bring you a preview of the first episode. And here I'm talking about why, at least on paper, mornings should always be better than afternoons during the rut. Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails is brought to you by Redneck Blinds, Code of Silence Apparel, the Hunt Stand app, Whitetail Institute, Research Equals Results, B3 Archery, Muddy Outdoors tree stands, Stealth Cam trail cameras, My Outdoor TV, and Hoyt. Welcome to the first episode of Rut Hunting Strategies. I'm excited about this series. It's a lot of action this time of the year, and it's just fun to explore all the exciting ways that we can hunt the rut. I'm going to try to stay as current as I can. Right now it's about the middle of October, so I want to talk about some of the strategies that we're starting to look at right now. So I want to stay, like I said, as timely as I can, and as the season progresses, as the rut advances, I'm going to talk about strategies that should work during that current time frame. So first I want to talk about when I start hunting mornings, and this is really almost a morning versus evening kind of an episode. I want to talk about the importance of mornings and why I think they really are almost the key to the rut. You know, I've killed a pretty decent number of bucks in the afternoons during the rut, but I think my percentages would be probably 60% morning or higher. And you know, if I was probably a little bit more ambitious and was able to get out of bed on some of those really cold mornings, it'd probably be even higher. I want to tell you first why I think mornings are so good. So like right now, it's late morning, midday. When I got up this morning, it was about 50 degrees, maybe a little bit cooler than that. But by the time this evening finishes, by the time the sun sets, it's probably going to be 65 degrees. You know, maybe even a little bit warmer, as it's been, you know, a fairly warm October. So my point is, it tends to be cooler in the mornings. And generally what the deer are doing, especially the bucks, they're going into the doe bedding areas. They're going towards the places where the does bed in the mornings. So they're on their feet longer. It stays cooler. They can hunt and cruise and cover ground and check for does a lot more comfortably in the mornings than they can in the afternoons. So they tend to spend more daylight hours on their feet in the mornings than they do in the afternoons. So if you've got a good stand location, the morning can be really, really good. I've been on a lot of morning hunts where there were still bucks moving 3 to 4 hours after legal shooting time. And there aren't very many situations where you're going to hunt an afternoon spot where you're going to have that much action. Usually the bucks are moving in the direction where the does are going, and in the afternoons the does are starting to move toward food. So that means the bucks are tending to move in that direction too. And by the time they get there, you know, it's going to be, you know, pretty close to the end of legal shooting time. You know, maybe a half an hour to an hour at best. If you hunt them a little bit deeper in the timber, you might get action a little bit sooner. But again, they're not going to be on their feet until the does start to get on their feet. I used to hunt bedding areas a lot, and I still do. In the afternoons, and it's not uncommon at all to see nothing, just, you know, nothing's moving until that last hour. Then everything gets up and moves toward food. You know, does get up, bucks get up. You'd swear there was nothing anywhere on that whole bedding ridge And the next thing you know, there's 5 or 6 deer. They're just popping up here, popping up there. But it's always that last hour, and they're always moving away. You might get a little bit of milling around action for just a little short time, but the activity's moving away. So in the afternoons, you have to be towards the food, which again, like I mentioned, that limits the amount of time that you're going to have where the bucks are on their feet in the area where you're hunting in daylight. So take the mornings in the bedding areas. By contrast, now usually what happens is the does will start to filter in right at first light, and they're in there first usually. And I would say, in my experience, it can be as much as an hour, even an hour and a half after the beginning of legal shooting time before the bucks start to show up. You start losing almost a little bit of faith in the spot, and then boom, one pops in over here, and then, you know, on the other side of the ridge there's another one, and pretty soon they're milling all through there. I don't really know for sure what they do. My guess is that they're filtering back from the feeding areas where they're actively checking for does during the night, and they're just kind of filtering back into the bedding areas late. Or maybe they just go from one to the other, and you just happen to be, you know, on the one that, or I happen to be on the one that they're hitting second or third. Whatever the case may be, it's very, very common that I don't even see them at all for the first hour to hour and a half of daylight. But then it may stretch on for 2-3 hours after that before the activity shuts down. In a lot of cases, it's almost midday by the time the morning activity shuts down. And then the deer all rest for a little while. The bucks will bed. The does are obviously bedded. And then, like I said, you get that last hour of daylight and everything pops up and starts moving again. So that's why I like the mornings so well, and why I feel like if you're not hunting the mornings, you're definitely missing the best action of the rut. And I alluded a little bit to where I like to sit. Obviously the bedding areas, but what bedding areas? Ideally, you know where the does bed. And you can assume that depending upon the terrain and how much experience you've got. You can look at aerial photos and topo maps, and you can pinpoint spots where does tend to bed. Like in the terrain behind me, the does bed on these points, on these ridges, on the ends of the ridges. And they like those spots because they can bed with the wind at their back, and they can see anything happening below them down the slope, and they can smell any danger behind them. So they tend to favor, depending on the wind direction, the downwind fringe of these ridges. And that's a very common behavior. I mean, I can count on that almost 100%. So I don't have to do a whole lot of in-season or post-season scouting to know where they're going to be bedded. But if you don't have those types of patterns where you hunt, it probably makes a lot of sense when the season is over to get out and do a bunch of walking and find those beds. Usually you're looking for groups of beds because the does tend to bed as family groups, and the bucks generally will bed individually. So if you find a lot of beds together, it's almost always doe family groups. There might be some younger bucks in there, you know, like 1.5-year-old bucks, but normally it's just going to be does and fawns. And then the bucks, like I said, tend to bed separately. If you find individual beds, or, you know, 1 or 2 beds together, better chance that that's, you know, a buck bedding area. So that just takes you through identifying, you know, where to find these locations. You still have to figure out how to hunt them. You're balancing risk versus reward. And maybe that's one of the key themes that I'm going to be hitting on through this whole 10-episode series, is how aggressively can you hunt? Because every time you hunt a spot, you are impacting it to some extent. You're educating some of the deer, you're making it a little bit less productive in the future. So the more aggressively you hunt, the more impact you have, and then the less, let's say, huntable the deer in that area are going to be in the future. So sometimes it makes sense to be aggressive, and we'll talk about that as the series goes on. But a lot of times you want to keep those areas as fresh as you can for as long as you can, because you don't have an unlimited number of doe bedding areas in the places that you hunt. So you want the does to stay. You're less worried about the bucks than you are about the does, because the bucks are going to be where the does are. So as long as the does are comfortable there and you don't hunt it so hard that they give up on those bedding areas, the bucks are going to be there. That's just the way the route works. So the key is the downwind fringe. You always want to stay in the downwind fringe of these bedding areas. The entry and exit needs to be as bulletproof as possible, like any stand location, which means you need to take advantage of ditches, you need to take advantage of tree lines, you need to take advantage of anything that hides you long enough to get into those spots. And obviously you got to get back out again. Sometimes that can be just as tough as getting in. If it's really a still morning, I don't go into my best spots because it's almost impossible to get in there without the deer knowing. They hear the crunching leaves. It ruins those areas too quickly. So I avoid my best spots on a dead calm morning, and I'll hunt secondary locations and then wait till the breeze kicks up a little bit more and go back into those areas, at that time. Or you can potentially hunt them in the afternoon too. But like I said, that game is usually over fairly quickly in the evening. So hopefully I've impressed upon you the value of hunting beds, how to hunt them, and now let's talk about when. I like to hunt the bedding areas again, playing that risk versus reward game when the bucks are on their feet more in daylight. You don't really want to go into those spots and risk educating those does, making them less comfortable in those locations if the bucks aren't out cruising yet. It just doesn't make sense. So I wait until roughly the 25th, 26th, 27th of October, that last week of October. And ideally, if you catch a cold front that last week of October, you're going to have some really good hunting. So we're, right now as I'm recording this, we're 10 days away roughly, or a little bit less than that, from the time when this strategy should really be sort of your go-to. So it gives you a little bit of time to think through it. Think about where the does bed in the area that you hunt. How can you get into the fringe of that? How can you get in and out of there without them knowing? And you put those pieces of the puzzle together and you're going to have a really, really good last week of October. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you right back here again in another week for the second episode of Rut Hunting Strategies. Hopefully you enjoyed that preview. I'm going to come back again maybe as early as tomorrow with the preview of my second episode in that series, and that is about how to simplify the rut, because we can make it pretty complicated if we try to read the sign and follow the trail camera photos, and we can chase ourselves around in circles. But there are ways you can make the rut a lot simpler. So come back again, and I'll have a preview to that episode very soon. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you right back here again soon for the next episode of Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. And remember to always dream big.